There are a number of very concerning aspects, not only linking the applicant to the crimes, but also regarding his circle of influence. His application for bail is accordingly refused.
Katiso Molefe sat in the dock of the Alexandra Magistrate Court, a man of 61 years whose past carried the stink of shadowy deals and hidden identities. The room was packed, the air taut, as if everyone present could feel the weight of what hung in the balance. Molefe was not an ordinary accused. He was the alleged mastermind, the puppeteer of murder for hire, the man whose whispered orders sent musicians and businessmen alike to their graves in clouds of gun smoke and shattered glass. The court's decision was clear and uncompromising. Bail denied. Magistrate René Boshoff's voice cut across the chamber, a scalpel rather than a gavel, slicing into Molefe's story. Molefe had failed to prove exceptional circumstances. He carried prior convictions abroad. Drug-related crimes, fraud committed under a false Lesotho passport, his alias, David Tembo Lebitsa, etched into documents like a scar that would never heal. Large sums had drifted through his company's accounts, unexplained, the kind of money that does not knock politely but barges in, trailing blood on the soles of its shoes. Molefe sat expressionless, yet those watching felt he was measuring the angles of his fall, his mind working behind the stillness, for he had been accused of more than one murder. The state claimed he had masterminded the assassination of Opa Sifoka, better known as DJ Somebody, a man adored in clubs and on the airwaves, gunned down alongside his bodyguards in Woodmead on a November night in the year 2022. They had left News Cafe, an ordinary gig, and stepped straight into the jaws of death. The killers had carried an AK-47 rifle, a weapon built not for mistakes but for finalities. Molefe's hand, it was alleged, had guided those bullets. His reach was said to have extended further still. A man, first name Don, shot dead near the N17 off-ramp in March of 2023. Armand Swart, an engineer murdered in April 2024, his death thought to be a mistake born of corruption and whispers. To the state, all of these trails led back to Molefe, a man who wore many masks, but behind every mask lurked the same calculating mind. The killings of DJs and rappers in Johannesburg had been more than random acts of violence. They were the smoke rising from a single fire, and at the centre of that blaze was a consignment of drugs worth millions. It had vanished in KwaZulu-Natal while under police custody, swallowed by the void that so often appears when law enforcement collides with organised crime. The loss was not forgotten. It was remembered, counted, hunted for. When the consignment resurfaced, it was not in some remote hideout, but in the pulsing heart of Johannesburg's nightlife. Clubs that thrived on music and champagne suddenly found themselves awash with narcotics sold at cut-rate prices, as if the drugs were being pushed out quickly, recklessly, to make up for lost time. For the original owners of the shipment, whispered about in the city as the Big Five, this was a betrayal too brazen to be ignored. They were figures rarely seen, but their reach was felt in every deal, every whispered threat. To them, the reappearance of their cargo in unfamiliar hands was an insult, and in the underworld, insults are often answered with blood. South Africa's drug trade is no minor affair. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Assessments in the past decade have pointed to the country's role as both a transit hub and a growing consumer market. Cocaine from South America and heroin from East Africa funnel through its ports and borders, feeding a multi-billion rand economy of narcotics. Local syndicates, international cartels, and corrupt officials all claim their cut. For those who enter this world, the risks are immense, but so are the rewards. A single successful shipment can bring wealth that legitimate businesses cannot match in a lifetime. That promise of quick riches, of power bought with powder, lures men into danger, despite knowing full well how many before them have ended in shallow graves. It was in this landscape that DJ Somebody's name became entangled. Friends insisted he was not a man of crime, only of lifestyle and music. Yet innocence does not shield you once the shadows decide you have seen too much. To the men hunting their missing millions, somebody was no longer just a performer. He was a potential liability. His proximity to those who moved the consignment, whether by choice or by chance, was enough to place him on the wrong side of suspicion. Sources whispered that a Cape Town businessman tipped off the Big Five, clearing himself by pointing the spotlight elsewhere. The syndicate, driven by fear that somebody knew too much, drew up a list. His name was inked in. Some argued for mercy, saying he had no taste for crime. But mercy is rare in a world built on blood and powder. The decision was made. Somebody would die. On the day of his murder, he had been preparing to leave Johannesburg, his belongings already packed, the city's shadows pressing too close. His final gig at News Cafe was not advertised, a precaution, as if he sensed the wolves circling. But even unannounced performances cannot silence fate. The killers struck with precision. Woodmead was left echoing with gunfire, 3 men dead, their car crumpled into silence. The killings did not end there. A rapper by the name Heavy Pablo and DJ Vintos met similar fates, each shot echoing the same refrain: the lost consignment, the missing millions, the suspicion that someone had crossed the wrong line. Each name added to the body count deepened the suspicion that what looked like random hits were in fact part of a careful design, with Molefe as the alleged designer. His dealings were laced with the world of taxi bosses and billionaires, men whose fortunes were not built on stock exchanges or corporate boards, but on the blacktop of South Africa's roads. The taxi industry, carrying millions of commuters each day, is more than a transport network. It is an empire, fractured, fiercely contested, and often dripping with blood. Taxi bosses have long held reputations not only as businessmen, but as power brokers, men whose authority extends into politics, construction, and entertainment. With such reach comes both wealth and violence, and those who partner with them are never free of either. It was into this world that DJ Somebody stepped when he began seeking backing to expand his nightclub empire. He dreamed of branches not only in Pretoria, but also in Menlyn and Cape Town, neon-lit temples of music and champagne. But nightclubs cost money, serious money, and in South Africa, the line between clean and dirty financing is rarely clear. At one stage, somebody is said to have approached a now-deceased taxi boss for funding. The deal allegedly tied investment to the sale of drugs inside his venues, a devil's bargain that came with consequences no contract could ever spell out. When that taxi boss died, the web tightened further. Enter Joe Sibagnoni, better known as Joe Ferrari, a taxi billionaire whose name carried both prestige and menace. He too put money into Ayetpiep, helping to bankroll the Menlyn branch. To outsiders, it looked like legitimate investment. To insiders, it was another chain binding somebody to men whose world ran on more than music and champagne. It ran on territory, fear, and the steady stream of cash from narcotics and taxis alike. This collision between the taxi industry and the nightclub circuit is not unique. For decades, the taxi wars of South Africa have spilled over into other sectors. Club security, event promotions, even music careers have been financed, protected, or threatened by the same men who control minibus routes and commuter ranks. Violence is the tax that shadows these fortunes. Those who try to distance themselves often discover that once you take money from such men, the debt is not easily repaid. For somebody, the price of expansion may have been exactly that, a debt he could never settle. In the high-stakes world where taxis, drugs, and clubs collide, friends can become enemies overnight, and promises broken can cost not just businesses, but lives. Even after death, the ripples spread outward. DJ Vetties, a friend of somebody's, survived a hit that left bullets lodged in his body. His social media posts enough to draw unwanted attention from killers who watched every word and every picture. Molefe's bail hearing laid bare the state's case like a crime novel scattered across a courtroom table. The pieces were not yet bound together, but each fragment pointed to a man whose fingerprints lingered on too many shadows. Prosecutors spoke of unexplained bank transactions flowing into his company accounts, large sums of money with no clean story attached. Money is always the truest witness, and here it spoke loudly, whispering of paymasters unseen and deals made far from daylight. Then came the WhatsApp messages, seized and studied. In the cold clarity of digital text, conspiracies begin to look ordinary, almost banal. Yet hidden in the banality are orders, confirmations, the short, sharp phrases of men who trade lives as if they were currency. Investigators suggested these messages tied Malef to the alleged hitmen Michael Tao, Floyd Mabusela and Musa Kakana, their words forming the invisible bridge between mastermind and trigger-finger. The state insisted that these communications, together with the financial trail, painted a picture of orchestration. Molefe was not some detached businessman caught in a storm of gossip. He was, they argued, the storm itself, hiding behind aliases and layers of deniability. His history of false passports and convictions in the United Kingdom only reinforced the pattern. A man skilled at evasion, a man who lived by deception. The NPA's spokesperson's words carried the final weight. Molefe, she said, was not only a suspect, but a danger to society. His knowledge that conviction would mean a long prison term was, in itself, a motive to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, or simply vanish into the night. The interest of justice does not permit his release, she told the court, reminding everyone that justice is not merely about the accused, it is about the living who still fear, the witnesses who still breathe. To those who listened, the evidence sounded less like speculation and more like a trap slowly closing. Bank records, digital messages, past convictions, each a thread, and together they wove a net. The suspense for the public was not whether Molefe was guilty, that the court would decide in time, but how deep the rabbit hole went. Who else was named in those chats? Who else had transferred money under the table? And how many more bodies lay behind the curtain of silence still shielding Johannesburg's underworld? The Sofoka family, still broken from the night when Opa was cut down, found a sliver of relief in the ruling. They wanted the killings to stop, the chain of hitman for hire to be severed. Yet they knew that Molefe's return to court in September would be only another chapter in a story that felt endless. A saga where money, music and murder walked hand in hand through the streets of Johannesburg.
And so the story of Katiso Molefe remains unfinished. The trial still ahead, the shadows still thick with unanswered questions. Was he the spider at the center of the web, or only one strand in a much larger design? The evidence grows, the bodies remain, and the truth waits to be dragged into the light of the court. What do you think? Was Molefe the mastermind, or just another pawn in South Africa's underworld of drugs, taxis, and music? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in the crimes, corruption, and controversies shaping our world.